Brilliant. Okay, hello. This is another Coffee and Concepts, which we haven't done for a while. I'm guessing it was because of the retreats that I was doing last month. Um, Basically, what I want to do is cover one of the themes from last week's seminar and then open it up for conversation. Um, it ends up that the stuff I was talking about, which makes up one of the chapters in the book that I'm writing, I think is very pregnant with ideas. So I might want to do a couple more talks on this, on these ideas. But everything I'm doing at the moment is attempting to really clarify the work of parotheology, of transformance art, Church of the Contradiction. That's what I'm really trying to do here. That's what it's always been about. But I feel like we're getting closer to a point when we can start doing some of these events again and seeing what this looks like in practice. So what I did last week is I took the notion, I provocatively called it the pervert's guide to church. And I used the idea of perversion to explore the difference between knowledge and belief. Now, the more I have read into this, as I say, the more I think that there are other ideas to explore. I think this is a very fruitful kind of avenue to take. Um, but very briefly, the basically I think it was Tolstoy who said there is one step between the 5-year-old and the adult, but an infinite abyss between the infant and the 5-year-old. Something like that. I'm not quoting him exactly right, but basically it's a saying that goes, we're pretty much the same person as we were when we were 5, right? But so much happens between 0 and 5. Like that is where a huge amount, like a universe of stuff occurs. Um, and in psychoanalysis, the you could say in Lacanianism, and you will know this from listening to me and reading yourselves, but central to this psychoanalytic idea is that the infant is gradually coming to terms with an experience of lack. And there's three ways that this can be described. Lacan describes it: frustration, castration, privation. Right? These are three terms that are used: frustration, castration, privation. Very quickly, what they mean is the infant during the weaning process, the weaning complex, experiences the frustration of not getting fed when they want to be fed. Right, there is a presence and absence of sustenance or of comfort, of warmth, right? And so the infant very early on experiences a type of lack, a lack of something, and this is called frustration. Um, Castration, in a nutshell, means, if I was to really boil it down, it's a confrontation with the idea that the other is lacking. So it's not just that I'm not getting sustenance, but you start to realize that the other is a person with desires and interests. And, you're one of those desires, but they have other desires. Um, uh, there's what's called the intrusion complex, which is where you realize that there are other siblings or other children or other competitors for your mother's love. So there's castration, and then privation in a nutshell can be described as the realization that this lack is fundamental. Right. So there, I've just kind of covered very quickly in 3 minutes something very, very complicated, but frustration, where you're not getting fed when you want to be fed, castration, the other is lacking, privation, lack is part of everything. What I find fascinating about this is you could say that the entire history of thought is also the coming to awareness of these ideas in physics and in biology and in politics and in art. Um, and I'm not going to go into that in any great depth, but that's what, if I was an academic, I would probably want to explore that a little bit more. That that this very, very early encounter with lack is expressed in various ways, throughout human history. And this is what Hegel called absolute knowledge, the realization of a fundamental asymmetry in everything. Okay. And you've heard me talk about that at various times. What was interesting to me about the perverse structure is it's a very clear example of a structure in which we can know something and yet nevertheless believe the opposite. So this is called disavowal. Disavowal is where um, you know very well that astrology doesn't work. Nevertheless, you read the stars, right? You know very well that there's nothing that can really tell you what you should do with your life. Nevertheless, you do the tarot reading, right? Now, you may do the tarot reading because you really believe in it, but what's interesting is when you do things that you don't believe in, right? That you know very well something isn't magical, and yet weirdly you treat it as if it is. And that's what I was exploring in the talk. Um, now, what what's central to the Church of the Contradiction is the idea that um, we need a religious expression of this coming to terms with lack, right? That's kind of like what Church of the Contradiction is in a nutshell. And one of the reasons, again, why I was interested in the perverse structure, I talked about fetishism. So fetishism is where you need an object in order to have sex, like sexual excitation, right? The fetish is the object that's required. And in uh, psychoanalysis, basically, the fetish is the object that protects us from the realization that the other is lacking, right? That's, again, in a nutshell, theoretically, the fetish object is what prevents you from experiencing the lack in the other. You may know they're lacking, but the fetish object is whatever protects you from the existential encounter. It binds your anxiety in a particular way. So what I was arguing in the talk is you can think to some extent of some religious structures as being fetishistic. Uh, you know, I know very well that there is doubt and unknowing and et cetera, et cetera. Nevertheless, I engage in religious practice and it prevents me from experiencing the existential trauma of a fundamental doubt, unknowing, mystery, and complexity. So you can fully know that there is doubt and unknowing and complexity, and yet weirdly protect yourself from the encounter existentially with that experience. Now, one of the things that's interesting about Christianity is that it gives you an image of a wounded God, right? So this is very, very interesting. So you think of the crucifixion image, which has kind of like captured so much imagination throughout the centuries. It is an image of a wounded or a lacking God. And I don't want to get into too much detail here. I'm going to say I'll do more talks about it in the future. But one thing you can think about that is it's very interesting that right at the heart of the imagery of Christianity, you have a fundamentally wounded Messiah. And you could talk about religion sometimes as frustration, right? You're frustrated at God because you feel that you are alienated from God. So there's a frustration. God may sometimes be there and sometimes not, and you feel frustration, right? Castration is the idea that it's not just that you're separated from God, but God is wounded as well. And it's not just that you're wounded and you feel alienation, but God is alienated. And that's the crucified Christ. And then privation would be the realization that that woundedness is in everything, including the absolute. Right? That's the move. Um, but religious practice as a fetish is what allows you to not experience the horror of the existential encounter with privation. It's in a nutshell. So you do not experience, my God, why have you forsaken me? Right? That's the interesting thing again about crucifixion is it's not theoretical atheism. Christ is not experiencing a theoretical separation from God. Christ is experiencing an existential separation from God. So God experiences an existential separation from God, right? And so if we participate in the crucifixion, that means we existentially experience that forsakenness. We embrace that forsakenness, and we see that as the heart of salvation, the heart of the absolute. And this is what I would argue is the salvatory or emancipatory move, is that you actually feel that terror, but it's not something that destroys you. It is something that liberates you. So it's a liberating experience. You think it's going to be terrifying. That's why we don't want it. That's why we want religious fetish to protect us from it. But it's actually an entering into that experience that we find freedom, liberation, a new way of living life without the burden of perfection, of oneness, of unity, of wholeness. We find a way to be able to bear the burden of our anxiety. Um, and that's what Church of the Contradiction is all about, is to try to create a type of liturgy. And this is really cool that people like James and Thomas are in this room, and Levon as well, who's written Liturgies of Lack. And I'm sure I'm missing some others who have done cool things, but those are three examples of people who are in this very Zoom room, um, who have created art that's not designed to fetishistically protect you from encountering woundedness, frustration, castration, privation, but almost holds your hand and draws you into that experience in a way that you can um, not just endure, but enjoy. And that really is the role of the artist, especially with Church of the Contradiction. Okay, I'm coming up to, I've got a couple more minutes, and I'll finish off with this. I talked to Helen at my retreat, a couple for both retreats. And she's just written a book on film called Psycho Cinema. And one of the things we talked about is, what makes a great piece of Hollywood art, right? And in a nutshell, what makes a great piece of Hollywood art? I mean, it's almost like every good movie has a structure. Um, and it is that. So Hollywood basically gives you object A, gives you an object that will make you whole and complete. Revenge, love, whatever, and it ends whenever the thing is received. But great cinema kind of exposes the structure of this. So Citizen Kane is all about seeking this thing, Rosebud, that this billionaire mogul says on his deathbed, Rosebud, this kind of secret thing that is the answer to his desire. And it turns out it's just a scheme, like a sledge, a childhood sledge, and it represents the moment that his childhood was taken away from him. And in that ripping away of his childhood, the sledge became a type of fetish object, became an object that symbolized the loss of childhood innocence. And at the very end of Citizen Kane, it's just chucked into a fire with all these other possessions. And in a way, the movie exposes, draws you into a type of liberating freedom from the pursuit of wholeness. Um, so in great literature, great arts, great music, great comedy, I think you'll find time and time again this type of structure. So I structured this around knowledge and belief. I said knowledge at its core, and it might be the only thing that we really know as human beings, that we know that we do not know. We know that there is a fundamental unknowing, a fundamental lack, a fundamental uh, complexity and asymmetry. So that's something that we know, but we believe that it doesn't exist. We believe that everything is whole and complete. That's what belief is. Belief is, in a way, what protects us from an encounter with our knowledge. And what I'm interested in is creating a liturgy in which we can come to know what we know, and no longer protect ourselves from that, but enter into it and discover that in what we think is going to be death, there is life. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I hope that made some sense. Please stick up your virtual hands, or if anybody wants to jump in with an initial question or comment. And while you're potentially sticking up your hands, I go like, this is, I know if early days in terms of this stuff, I know this is kind of complicated. But if you've been following my work for a while, maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe it'll make sense. But okay, maybe it's all so clear that nobody has
I have a
any.
question, actually, if that's okay.
Please jump in.
I'm pretty new to this work, so hopefully this isn't something that you've covered a lot. I was just really curious, in the context of the Christ story, you talk about the cross showing castration, woundedness. I'm curious, in that narrative, what does the resurrection symbolize in relation to this? Um, yeah, just wondering if you can speak to that.
Thank you. And lovely to see you in person. Am I Hyacinth? Hyacinth?
Hyacinth, yeah.
Hyacinth. Yes, thank you. It's want to know how to pronounce it correctly. Thank you. Um, yeah, in this narrative, the resurrection could be seen and can be seen as the living into this woundedness. So it kind of the resurrection almost flows naturally from, it's not like one happens and then the other. It's almost like heat and light. So the way I would argue it is that the entry into this death, into this identification with woundedness, turns into its opposite, turns into a new form of life, a new form of being in the world, one that is freed from the frenetic pursuit of wholeness and completeness. But I don't know if that feels substantial enough, but I'll throw that out as the initial the initial response. Hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're also welcome to type things in because I can see the chat box if anybody is not using the audio. Courtney, lovely to see you. Jump in your car as always.
Yes, at least that's where I start out. Um, I was also thinking, one of the reasons I didn't speak up after you finished was I my mind kind of got stuck on the wounded God too. And it's not that I stopped listening, but most of my mind was occupied with that image
Yeah.
the whole rest of the time you were speaking. Um, and it's not the I appreciate Hyacinth speaking up and and having us dive off into that because it's a it's a question that I've had uh, for a while now as well. And I've heard you speak on the living into the lack as being the resurrection, but I'm also thinking of how in in the narrative of the Bible uh, passages it talks about the wounds still being visible after the resurrection.
Yeah.
And that is just really, I hadn't ever thought of it quite in this way that, um, connecting the idea of if we have embraced the lack, that doesn't mean the wounds go away. And just as with the Christ being resurrected, the wounds didn't go away.
Mhm.
And I can't remember exactly how or if the wounds are described at all in the narrative. I mean, I'm thinking of the story of uh, Thomas requiring, needing to touch the wounds as proof of identity, but I don't recall if the wounds are actually described. I don't know if they're scars or if they're scabbed over or if they're just open constantly. I don't know. Um, but it's interesting to me to think through the implications of that for us if we are going to embrace the lack. What what will our wounds look like after that? Um, and we know will they scab over and or reopen? Will they periodically reopen and we have to confront them again and again and again? Um, will they just be scars that I don't know. I have this scar on my lip from when I was, I don't know, 4. I tripped over a giant pile of air and slammed my face into a radiator, and so I bit down on this lip with the tooth that got knocked out. So I have a U-shaped scar on my lip, and every once in a while it gets irritated and it itches. Um, and it's not even, I mean, people can't see it if I don't call attention to it. If I don't point it out, nobody notices it, but I know it's there. And I think about if I come to a point where I I truly can embrace the lack, and I still don't know what that means, practically speaking. What does that look like? I don't know. Um, but will if we have scars from our wounds, will they itch?
Mhm.
So just a
That's a
thought.
beautiful metaphor. That's a beautiful metaphor. And you remind me, which is so important, is that, and I'm reminded this in my own psychoanalysis, but how, easy it is to talk about, um, you know, this lack and embracing it and trying to live with this unknowing, but yet how hard it is in practice, how actually so difficult that this is why we need practice is art and music and literature. And what does it look like in practice? Yes, that's a very key thing for me. This liturgy is one of the ways it looks like in practice. But yeah, it's just so hard to live in this because yeah, that we need help. Tara, jump in.
Yes, I was thinking about the image of the empty tomb, of the original Gospel of Mark, how it ends very abruptly with the death in the empty tomb. There's not a resurrection in the original narrative. And just thinking about that emptiness as symbolic of the lack and the response of the women, one of fear, the fear and trembling, that sense of um it's mysterious. And then I was also thinking in the Hebrew text about Elijah and the symbolism of the cave. And this, I love Elijah. He's you think of what characters in the text you identify with, and he is solitary. He hears God in the still small voice, and he's close to nature and goes to the cave, but the cave is also this empty space, a space of darkness. Um, yeah, just thinking symbolically.
Yeah, those are all beautiful images. It's funny, like I don't talk about those religious images very much of late, and it's funny that you've mentioned them and Courtney, and like it's rife. That I mean, we see from the crucifixion to you say the empty tomb to these images of lack and of negation that's so central. But I think it's so radical that we all try to avoid a confrontation with this imagery. So yeah, the imagery of the empty tomb, I haven't thought about that myself, but you're right. Mark finishes the original Mark with the terror of it, just of a pure negation, an empty tomb. James, you want to jump in?
Yeah. Well, first off, sick over here, so my voice may go in and out. But I'm thinking about, well, okay. So through the process, um, eventually ending at privation, there is some type of assertion that that is a good thing, or hopefully that is a good thing of like uh self-recognition or the awareness to come to the point where you're like, okay, everything is lacking, that is somehow, ontological incompleteness is at the foundation of what we're dealing with. I have that within me and others have that within them, and that then like allows you some element of grace for others or for yourself, and then hopefully that proceeds into a tangible way in which we live our lives. So with that thought, that's also like a belief thing that I've come to for myself, and so with that thought,
It was nicely said, by the way. That was well
thank you,
succinctly put.
thank you. With that thought, I mean, you already know I'm in the arts, and I'm frequently like, God, this does not make enough money. So I frequently think, okay, like what is what role? Sorry, I'm a dog. What is my role? How can I contribute to how can I contribute to a possibly more whole, not whole, like a world where people have entered into a similar space and are able to cope with themselves and not project it out into the world, maybe like the most foundational way of like a defense mechanism of placing it out to somewhere else. And I keep coming back to art because if I can engage with myself and the things about myself that I don't like at their core, if I can deal with those and then offer those things to other people, if I can offer those things to other people as an invitation instead of presenting somebody like at the end of Wild Psychoanalysis, where Freud talks about like don't give somebody the information, you need to help them arrive it to there, basically. It's like disarming in a way. Like art can be disarming, or it can provide somebody the occasion or the opportunity. Like I can be a midwife for somebody else to experience themselves and to like experience potentially the movement toward privation. That is basically like why I've stayed in the arts, is I've thought about like, well, what could I do? Like I could make more money, or maybe I could, I don't know, like a public defense lawyer, or like something, like write something, I don't like something else. And what I keep coming back to is like, um, well, money, obviously, or like harm reduction, or like those kind of things. Like, I don't know if that is going to help as much as something else in the long term. I don't know. But anyways, I keep coming back to art for that reason of what I can contribute, or one of the things I think I can most contribute. Dealing with my own stuff, presenting it to other people as an invitation, potentially for them to deal with, or just being honest and sincere, and it ends up being an invitation, so that it is disarming and it's not like, hey, this, you're doing this because your mom, or whatever else, right? Like some type of jab. I suppose I'm really interested to know, Pete, whether from you or from anybody else, what your perspectives are, how you have maintained a worldview in which like you are able to help other people potentially move toward privation, or to move toward that, or what steps. I mean, like, like it's there's an old saying, at least where I grew up, that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So I don't want to, try and force anybody into that. And again, it's not going to work to like realization or that type of thing. So Pete, again, whether from you or from anybody else, please, I would love to know your perspectives on how you try to engage with people in your social world in a way that is disarming, or that can potentially help move towards some type of realization, either of the lack or of their own way that they engage in the world that is helpful or harmful.
Yeah, and as we're reflecting on that, do you have a link? What's the song that you played at one of my events that I think really captures this? What was it called?
It's called Separated. It's
Separated. If you can, if you have a way to put a link
not
in the
out.
chat. Oh,
It's
isn't
not
it?
out yet. Oh, yeah, I'm still producing it. I have the record coming out I think in the spring of next year.
There's probably, I think there might be a video of you doing it at one of my events.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
I
I can find
right.
that. I might be able to share that.
Yeah, please.
Unless you want me to take that off the internet, maybe you do want
No,
that.
no, it's all good.
Okay.
It's all good. Yeah.
That's just a song, by the way, that James has, which I think captures beautifully an artistic expression of what we're talking about. Um, Whenever someone else is talking, I might try and find it. Yeah, to summarize then what James is saying and let anyone jump in is so wild analysis, what he's referencing there is an article by Freud, where Freud basically says, don't give people advice. It doesn't work. The only time it works is if the person is right at the verge of it being useful. So occasionally you can maybe offer a piece of advice, but he's basically going, but most of the time it's not useful. You'll probably say the wrong thing. You probably know less than you think you do, et cetera, et cetera. And he kind of makes a case for, helping the person come to a realization themselves. And I know that doing my analysis, how frustrating it is because I want the analyst to give me advice and they kind of refuse because I'm the one who has to do the work. So if I understood James correctly, if people have any good examples of helping someone make space for this lack and unknowing and doubt and alienation in their lives, feel free to make a comment. I'll open that up widely, and because I don't know if Courtney or Levon, you're responding directly to that. Levon, you might be responding to that directly. I don't know.
I am directly responding
Yeah.
to that.
Okay.
So one of a really important thing to remember when you're sitting with people who are struggling or, is to handle their struggling. Part of the reason that people give platitudes or positive psychology is because they themselves don't want to go into that abyss and they want others not there. So if you want to help people move into this space, you also must be willing to go there with them. So, handle their dysregulation, handle their hysteria, handle their crying, handle what they're experiencing and be there with them in it and lean into it and ask them to tell you more about it, as opposed to just giving them something positive or advice or some platitude statement. I mean, sometimes you end up there once you go into the abyss because it's hard to stay there a long time. But lots of times our friends don't want us to be there. So they try to make us feel better right away. And it's not because they want us to feel better. They literally don't know how to handle being there with you. So yeah, I would say that's one of the first steps.
Can you share, because as we were talking, I was actually finding some links as well. Could you share in the chat box at all the liturgy you wrote? That it kind of is, I think, a good concrete example of inviting people into this experience. If you have it to hand, you could throw it into the chat box. I literally put in Helen's short film Alone. I'm actually going to bring that out in a couple of weeks officially as part of my CCon videos, but I've thrown it up. Some of you have seen it. It's called Alone, but again, it's an artistic expression, I think, of enacting what we're talking about. And I'm looking for James Spate's thing as well. Sorry, Levon, do you want to say anything else there? I didn't want to interrupt. Or did you finish? You're muted, but maybe you've gone now. Anybody else?
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Oh,
I didn't realize I muted myself.
I wondered,
yeah,
I thought that for a second. Yeah.
I have no problem sharing that and I can access it. And it's actually quite appropriate to what we're talking about with what Courtney said about the wounds and the wounds of Christ, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll find that and put it into the chat. And if you like, if there's time at the end, maybe we could end with it. I could read it out if you like. If not, it's fine. Others probably want to share. So okay.
No, that would be perfect. Actually, we can finish with that as well.
Okay.
I have a thought on the arts.
Jump in.
Yeah. So especially after our election here in the States, where it seemed like The winners had much more fun than we did. I'm thinking that art that invites us to go into the abyss, to embrace lack, could be a Mahler symphony or a Einstürzen and the Neubauten metal banging event, but it's great, right? It's great art. It's intense and it's fun to be in it. And you come out having touched on all kinds of deep feelings. And so that's what came up when we're talking about music. And the other thing was about resurrection. And well, I'm a lightweight Swedish Lutheran, right? But it always seemed like the resurrection kind of is the risk to me seems to be that it sort of brushes over and becomes a fetish for overcoming the wounds and the death and the abyss. And then I thought maybe if resurrection is Christ coming as spirit to us when we're gathered here today in love, right? Then I find that very appealing.
Thank you. I'm a very bad multitasker, by the way. As I'm listening, I'm also looking things up to put into the chat box. So my apologies.
I have one thought I was thinking about as Courtney was talking about her cut lip. Maybe, and I don't know if this makes sense. I usually need a lot of time to think things through, and I don't have the time. Maybe as we venture into the lack, and we start discovering what that is, maybe that wound, that inward sort of perspective on that wound, whatever the wound is turned more into a positive badge of sorts. And then that led me to thinking about, I've seen 2 or 3 veterans, since we're Veterans Day is tomorrow over here in the States, talking about receiving the Medal of Honor from Obama, or whatever president was in, and feeling embarrassed that they were getting this badge when so many other people were much more, they might have felt more deserving of that. And then they would realize that, well, this isn't my badge, that I'm just wearing it for all the others. And it becomes like a light of guidance, maybe, or maybe that's what those wounds are, as we discover to see them in a little bit more of a positive perspective. Maybe, maybe that's what this travel of the lack is too, is to discover those. I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
no, absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. And I'm going to stop looking things up and focus back on my main job of facilitating. My apologies. I should be at the helm here, and I'm not, because I'm looking up things. So if anyone else want to jump in, you can also take us in a different direction.
Can I just
Tracy.
also, hey, the crucifixion also struck me in that the framing that you did of it, of the wound and the separation from God, the being forsaken. And it struck me that I think it's always been framed to me as a thing that Christ did for us, as almost a way of us bypassing that feeling of lack and separation. We don't have to, he did. So when we're confronted with it in life, it's a real shock, right? So something's gone wrong, because Christ was already crucified so that everything else is going to go great.
Yes.
Everything else is going to be just fine from here on in, right? And the way you framed it, I'm going to think about this for a long time. I mean, not that I still am in the space of holding on to that theology like that, but it just strikes me how it's just a way to jump past the pain and then be smacked by it later. We jump past it really quickly, move to the resurrection. That's the part we really like.
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, that's beautifully said. Because that's in one sense the religious answer to this is, yeah, Christ does that for us. We don't participate in we talk about participation in crucifixion, but it's this kind of sense in which, no, it was done on our behalf, so we can avoid that. And then the wounds are provisional. Then there's the resurrected Christ. Whereas Courtney mentioned the idea of this, the woundedness is within the absolute eternally. So yeah, it's I think there's lots of interesting games we play to dull the idea of going into this place of woundedness.
I think it actually also plays with the other thoughts that were given about how to help others in this way. And I think I really agree with what Levon said of if you're coming to terms with it yourself and you're getting comfortable with the discomfort, yourself, that when you're with people, you can jump into wherever they are and be okay with it. It's been I've started, as you know, I'm starting to work in hospice, and there's not a lot of filters when you're that close face to face with death. And there aren't a lot of people who can hold space. You can see this with the family members of people being around a deathbed. They're not comfortable with it. So you can see exactly where they are in their life because it comes up there with no cushions. It's like, no, don't feel bad. No, it's going to be, no, it's whatever, whatever denial, whatever, or comfort, wherever they are in their thing. But I think the work that we have to do is our own so that we can just be there and have the capacity and the expansiveness to be there with them in big moments. So that's
Have we talked before? Have you mentioned that you like Julie Reich? Have we talked about Julie Reich's work at all? No, because her negative psychoanalysis, because she goes into the place of absolute negativity, and I think is particularly interesting for someone who is experienced in hospice work, because she's working with a type of experience in which you can't just say to the person, "Oh, tomorrow it's going to be better," But I don't know. Have we talked about that?
No, my only exposure has been what you did at Wake last year, and I've actually watched a couple videos probably of you interviewing her, and that's so that much at least.
Yeah, because I also find the James Spate video, I think, which I'm just putting it in, by the way. There we go. James, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah. Levon, I really appreciated what you had to say about experiencing, like leaning into the discomfort instead of like the common thing that is, or at least in my personal life, that it has been like with my parents very frequently, like discomfort at somebody else's discomfort. Like they can't like manage their own emotions in that way. And I think that's a very common experience for a lot of people, like you were saying. And then the exact same thing, Tracy, like you had mentioned. Also, Tracy, I was really struck by what you said. Yeah, about like Jesus, the crucifixion, like dealing with the difficulty of life so that we don't have, like, it's like a Band-Aid. And I had never really considered it that way. That's like, it really struck me. Yeah. The initial reason I had raised my hand again was actually about there was somebody had floated the idea at some point earlier. I don't remember when or who, but about what the symbolism of or if we're talking about symbolism of the crucifixion, the wounds, etc., what does the resurrection symbolize? And I was just thinking about if Jesus is an example of how we live or ought to or can, of leaning into the like the absolute being divided, the self-dividedness, then I just took it for a second, I just thought of it. Maybe somebody already said this, and maybe that's why I'm not sure. But even at its base, like that's a terrifying experience. That you're completely free. And we'll try and find any fantasy to cover over that, or any type of thing to cover over that. But amidst that terror, just that maybe that example is like at its base, it's oh, there's just life after it. Like it doesn't have to stay terrifying and scary. But like, nope, Jesus came back from the dead. There you go. There's life after it. So I don't know. I thought about that. That's just a quick thought.
Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in? I was trying to put a song in by Duke Special, but it won't allow me to put MP3s in because it says I'm not the host. Kate, are you there at all? If you're there, I think I am the host, but if I'm not, maybe you can make me the host, and I'll also the Duke Special.
I'm here, and you are the host, I believe. Oh, 1 second, I'm just up and
Okay.
running. Sorry, I'm just in demand.
Oh, yes, you're doing motherly duties. Yes.
You are host.
Oh, it said I'm restricted by the admin, so I don't know what that
Oh,
means.
that's your own fault.
That's another level up. That's higher up than me. That's God.
Let me see. No, only host can share in this meeting.
Yeah, the first time I've seen that about admin. I think, yeah, I'll figure that out. But that will come out in a couple of weeks. It's just another. I'm enjoying throwing things into the chat box as we're
You're
talking.
just self-divided, and you've now split yourself into host and admin.
Yes.
To divide yourself, and
Exactly.
therefore showing your own castration within the meeting.
Perfect. There you go. The perfect analogy. I'll drop it actually into some of the WhatsApp groups. I'll do that in the meantime. Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in? Take us any direction you want. I'm enjoying sharing things. Oh, Kate, jump in.
I'm so sorry.
Nope.
Daisy has a question in the chat.
Great. Oh, hello, Daisy. It's been a while since I've seen you. Hello. Good to hear from you. Oh, so she says the one that says I'm in. Oh, can you read it if you can see it?
I can read it. Hi, good to see you all. I wrote I'm in full lurk mode, so feel free to disregard my nudge, but I'm compelled to ask you to speak to us of humility, and sort of remembering and maintaining our own not knowing.
Yes. Do you want us to talk about that? Or sorry, you mean so
I felt compelled to just like throw that out there. That's what was coming to mind in all of this for me. And I'm very curious this group's thoughts or practices or experience with that part of our remembering, our not knowing, as opposed to the sort of temptation of navigating other people's or yeah.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yes. Very good. I mean, if anything, the desire of Church of the Contradiction, yes, is to draw us into this deep sense of humility. So yeah, if you're asking, yeah, what people's experience of that is, or practices of that, or want to comment on that, anybody's free to do that. That would be great. Wonder how I do that.
It might be a bit of a conversation stopper.
Yes, in the best possible way. Yes. I mean, are you referencing the idea that it's always easier to see how other people are missing things and putting this onto another rather than experiencing it for ourselves? Can I actually make a comment about it? I literally read a critique somebody made of me years ago, and I just read it yesterday, and I might include it in the book, where it was Catherine Sarah Moody, and she said that, one of the things I talk about a lot is how the church believes in our behalf. You don't really have to believe, but the church believes in your behalf. And she said, what if Peter's work helps you doubt on other people's behalf? So you don't have to experience doubt, complexity, humility. The Church of the Contradiction does it for you. And I was like, oh, that's quite good. That's a good critique. because we try to avoid that confrontation ourselves. How do we make sure we don't avoid this work? But that's what I'm inspired to say from what you said. I don't know if that's what you meant or not. But Leah, do you want to say something on that, or?
Yeah, in response to Daisy's question, the idea that brings up for me is like seeing what something is not, defining something by knowing what it's not. And the four discourses have really helped me with that, because now I listen when people are talking and I'm like, oh, I'm hearing echoes of this discourse and what they're and how they're conducting themselves. And then that means I can hear myself when I'm connected. So if I can sort of identify which discourse I'm inhabiting in that moment, it helps me see that I'm maybe less inhabiting the other three. And then it really helps me see what I'm not doing and what I'm not knowing, because I think each discourse has so much to offer that if I can sort of if I can see my limitations in that moment, then it helps me see how much else is out there. So just even like doing a subtraction problem helps me just see what I'm not doing or what I'm not about.
That inspires me. So, like, one of the things I try to do, I'm not very good at it necessarily, but whenever I'm thinking about political and cultural issues, especially that I don't have expertise in, I go, how much is this a Rorschach test that's projecting my unknown face? How much am I thinking that I know something when I'm just projecting out my own ignorance and my own anxieties? And so that's a little thing that I try to do in my own life, which isn't too far away from that notion of the four discourses as well.
I have a thought on the humility thing.
Oh, hi, Sarah. Didn't see
Hi.
you.
I've been walking in and out of the video because I'm multitasking as well. But I think like the problem that I have with humility is like as a hysteric, I tend to kind of get stuck in like, oh, I'm just an idiot. I don't know things, and what that has led to in my life is a lot of like just not doing anything. And I work with my spouse who is really good at like taking things on. And one of the things I asked him early on when we started working together is like, how do you know you're right? And he said to me, I don't, it's just my best idea. And I feel like that has been such a helpful guide for me as a hysteric who's always like kind of maybe overly humble, is to kind of realize that you need to be humble and arrogant at the same time in this way. Like you need to take a risk that is like all in a way that usually you only can do if you're totally arrogant. But I think that there's some kind of interesting dialectic of like not not imagining the future for sure, like not kind of setting yourself into the future, but just kind of putting yourself all in, but also at the same time not know. And it's a really, I don't know, it just feels very risky to me. I don't know if that's right, but it's been like a way for me as a hysteric to kind of move forward while also being humble, I guess.
Sarah, I mean, you're a great example in terms of the four discourses. You mentioned the hysterics, but the hysterics discourse, because I remember one of the things you've done is your desire, your idea, see if this resonates with you or not, but it always felt like your sense that there was an answer that you didn't have meant that you were always questioning, asking questions, reading more, sending emails. And so what happened is your humility and your sense of I don't know the answer has led you to consume vast amounts like out of it. You're one of those people, the people who I know in this group, I think Kate's very similar, who kind of really took to this partly because you had an inherent sense of I don't know, there's an answer. And that, so that unknowing that animated you and that animates you is actually responsible for, I think, you having done so much work. in this field and becoming really an expert in this field, which you are, with all the book studies you do now and the writings that you do. It it was that kind of sense of like, I don't quite understand this that moved you so far.
Yeah, I love that way of talking about it. I think that's totally right. And I think at the same time, like I wanted to start writing or start leading a discussion group, and there was something always in the way of allowing me to do that, that the like, I don't know. Like, I mean, I have people at work always tell me, like, stop saying you're an idiot. And I'm like, you have no idea how much I don't know. Like, you just have no idea. And so it's like you can get stuck only reading. And I think that there's something there. Like, I remember the moment where I was like, I'm just going to lead my own book study, not because I could do it better than you, but because you're not doing enough of what I want. And I'm just going to have to be the idiot that does it. Or like with writing, like I had such writer's block for like 10 years or something. And so I think it's kind of like, um, yeah, there's some kind of fantasy of like, I could actually write something that I agree with. And then I go and I try and then it kind of like is that dialectic back with the humility of like, oh, I didn't really get it. But somehow it's like I read the stuff that I'm writing now and it's more um yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't even say like it's right. It's just like I feel like I'm moving forward. And so I think as a hysteric, I'm cautious to be like only ever be humble. There's some kind of like, I don't know, arrogance or risk taking that you have to do too.
Yeah. Or well, and you ask the questions until someone like me says, I don't know, which is the perfect, the hysterics discourse kind of questions the authority until the authority reveals that they don't know. And then that's the answer. Then you go, okay, there's no one has the, we're all struggling in the dark. We're in the last 10 minutes. So anybody who wants to say something, stick up your hand, and we'll have a little row of people to comment, and then we'll finish with Lavon's reading this beautiful liturgical piece that she wrote, partly at least, when she was in Northern Ireland at my retreat. Bill, jump in.
Hi, thanks. Daisy, my current hobby horse thing is people use one word to describe something really complex, not looking at you, Lacan, or even Pete, but who knows what pyrotheology really means. But I'll just pretend I know exactly what you mean when you say, speak to us of humility, and I'll use my interpretation of what humility might be. But I think it's a complex thing. And it's almost contradictory. It's like, you want me to speak to you about humility? Well, no, because I don't know anything about it. But Pete sort of addressed that. So I think one thing is, we could say is like, everyone should have humility because I think one thing to know is nobody knows, right? And if you think, maybe if I went to Oxford and got 10 PhDs, then I would know. No, you still wouldn't, right? So nobody knows. So that's one thing. And then apparently even God doesn't know. But
yeah, I was going to say that's the next level. Yeah.
But one technique is the dialectic, right? So Hegel is very much the shining example of you think you know, guess again, go do that dialectical, or it's not something you can really do, but like hang out in a place that is going to be outside your comfort zone, and you'll probably realize you really didn't know everything the way you thought it was. So the dialectic is, this great way. And then the point is, at a certain point, you realize, yeah, nobody knows everything. There is no final position. It's just that everything as Tom McGowan says, inherent self-contradiction. So you can't really take one position or the other. So that's the Hegel take on it. The other thing is, so we've been talking in our Discord group, been trying to do a poor man's Lacanian interpretation of the big events in the Bible, right? So Kate started at the crucifixion. What a great place to start. Dabbled a little bit on the resurrection, but then, of course, we have to go all the way back to the fall. And then I looked at Zizek's interpretation of the resurrection. It's really crazy. So if you want a really fun, it's like Klein bottle. It's like death and life inside each other and this and that. It's like, you might have fun looking at Zizek's interpretation of the crucifixion and the resurrection and how those fit together and what they mean and stuff like that. But I think the thing that works for me better is what Boothby was recommending, again, from the Lacanian perspective, is love your enemies. And it wasn't his idea. I think of it as Jesus's idea, right? And so you want to realize that you don't know everything, talk to somebody who's your enemy. And we don't do that because maybe they know something about us that's going to take us down a notch or two. But I think it's also, for me, a more effective way than meditating on the resurrection and God's this and that. It's like, this person here, they look really powerful. They look like they're going to make whatever country great again. But, if you talk to them, they have doubts and fears and desires and lacks. And then, oh, yeah, maybe I do too, right? So I think for me, that's more effective technique than let's interpret crucifixion this way. The main problem I have with that is I just don't relate to like superheroes. And I remember I was at church helping to plan a vacation Bible school one summer, and it was like, here's the theme we're doing: superheroes of the Bible. David, look at that. He killed this Goliath, and they just took all these humble characters of scripture and said, we're going to turn them into superheroes. Like, no, I mean, that's Marvel. That's that's the comic book approach. And I really struggled going to church. It's like St. Paul, what a great guy. But it was very easy to say, yeah, but he's St. Paul. He's a saint, Only saints do that stuff. And that's not me. And it's even worse. It's like God, but he's God. Only God does that stuff. I don't really have to do that. Jesus, he's the Son of God. He has to sacrifice and love his enemies, but I don't actually have to do that. But if you actually talk to your neighbor and or your enemy, I think the Boothby, that less Hollywood dramatic approach works better in terms of kind of recognizing we all have that division.
That's brilliant. I love what you said, and I'd love to echo three of the things that you mentioned there. One is you made me think that the best superhero movies are exactly the type of superhero movie that strips that bare and you realize the superhero is a broken, destroyed person. And there's a few of them out there. I can't remember any of them off the top of my head, but Marvel exactly is the superhero. But whenever a movie strips that down, that's a great example in film of what we're talking about. I love what you said about the two types of there's humility of what we don't know, and then there's potentially humility of there's unknowing within everything. And then one last thing that you said, which I really liked. I'll maybe remember it in a second, but thank you. I appreciate what you were saying. Of course, your major point. I mean, what you said is beautiful. Love your enemy. I mean, Boothby's way of interpreting that, as you know, is that you open yourself up to being critiqued and to seeing yourself differently, and to your entire world being ruptured by encountering otherness, by encountering the other. And so the way you said it is perfect, is potentially the inverted commas spiritual discipline of humility is the ability for us to encounter the other, and to be open to the other. And so I think that's beautiful. And the book that he's referencing, I think, is Embracing the Void, which is a really good book. Anybody else put your hands up? But it looks like Courtney will maybe finish with you potentially, and then on to Levon. I see you're home now out of the car, so far in.
Yeah, but we don't have to finish with me. But... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Matt. Go.
To open yourself. It's tricky to open yourself up to the critique of the others. So the Jewish guy in 1939 should go to his German Nazi friend and say, help me understand, your position. Yeah. Sometimes, at the same time, and I agree with Bill, it's very nicely put, but sometimes you have to say no, right?
Yeah. Okay, well, that's definitely a very interesting thought that opens a lot of stuff up. Thank you for that. Courtney, do you want to, because you may even also have a reference to that as well, because I know with some of your thoughts on kind of American politics at the moment. But I don't know if that's the direction you want to go in, so I don't want to push you in any direction. So go wherever you want to go.
Well, I can very easily go in that direction.
No.
I'll just say I'll put it this way, and this was not my metaphor, but it's just something that's gone around the internet. Some of you have probably heard it or read it before, that if you own a bar, you want the bar to be a place for everyone to come, but you also invite the Nazis into your bar, there will come a point where what you have is a Nazi bar, because they are not safe for other people to be around, and the other people will leave. And eventually all you've got is Nazis in your bar, and your bar, you are now the owner of a Nazi bar. So I think there is a lot of nuance here. There is a lot of turning over tables in the temple. There's a lot of learning how to set healthy boundaries when forgiveness, yes, kindness, yes, but sometimes for me to be kind to my gay neighbor means I stand between my gay neighbor and the militant fundamentalist who is trying to hit my gay neighbor, and I hit back on his behalf or her behalf. I have to, if I'm going to be a shelter for others, for the downtrodden, for the underprivileged, for the fringes of society, I have to put myself on the line. I have to put myself between them and whatever is attacking them. I have to go into the temple and use a whip to drive out the people who are taking advantage of the oppressed. And that sucks. It's terrifying. I am by nature a people pleaser and a conflict avoider. I don't like it. It sends my blood pressure up and sends me into a really bad headspace, and I don't like it. But for me, caring for others and caring for the people who don't have the advantages that I have means I set my discomfort aside and I do what I have to be there for them. And just the other thing I wanted to say is that I feel like I need to live in this conversation that we're having. I just really appreciate everything that everybody has said in this conversation. I'd been thinking all week that I need to make more art that highlights and emphasizes everything we've all been discussing today and calls out, hangs a lampshade on the fact that we all are lacking. And all of you today have really inspired me further to do that. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. I really appreciate your involvement in this over the years, so thank you. And for those of you who are doing the book study, next week I think it'll be a chapter on this notion of the commons and what it means to wrestle with some of the ideas that have come up at the very end of this. And if you're not doing the book study, if you're welcome to just come in. It'll be this link, and it's a chapter from Embracing Alienation. But even if you're not doing the book study, that's a great book on this subject. So to finish up, Levon, can I hand over to you? And once Levon's finished the liturgy, I'll just close the room. So thank you. Oh, and Hyacinth, thank you very much for being part of this first time and contributing. Appreciate it. If you're still there, I'm not sure if you're still there or not.
Okay. If my voice wavers, sorry, the nerves when you read something that you've written, they're always strong. So I'll do my best. O split and divided God, grant me the grace that with this remembrance I may honor ontological death and how it impacts me. Praise and honor be given thee, O most split and broken Jesus, by reason of the wound in thy left hand. By this holy and contradictory wound, I'm changed and given a new perspective. Grant me humbled around those who oppose me, that I may be kind. Deliver me from my own dogma now and by any other ideologies to come, that I may find myself sharing in the glory of thy blessed kingdom in the here and now. Praise and honor be given thee, O split and broken Jesus, by reason of thy wound in thy right hand. By this holy and contradictory wound, I enter into alienation and humbly entreat thee to suspend me in holy desire day and night, and in this holy lack, preserve me in sacred separation. Oops, my computer. Praise and honor be given thee, O split and broken Jesus, by reason of the wound in thy right hand. By this holy, contradictory wound, I enter into alienation and humbly entreat thee to suspend me in holy desire day and night, and in this holy lack, preserve me in sacred separation. Praise and honor be given thee, O split and broken Jesus, by reason of the wound in thy left foot. By this holy contradictory wound, may I grow curious about my splitting and not seek wholeness to distract myself. I entreat thee by this bitter wound to help me tarry with being divided, that I may forever remain incomplete in time and eternity. Praise and honor be given thee, O split and broken Jesus, by reason of thy wound in thy right foot. By this holy and contradictory wound I ruminate, that by a devout and frequent remembrance of my ontological wounds, I may honor its sacredness and testify my gratitude for the suffering, so that I may remain in accordance with empathy. Praise and honor be given thee, O split and broken Jesus, by reason of the wound in thy sacred side. By this holy and contradictory wound, I am gutted, so I may participate in the rigors of the brokenness that creates life. That at the hour of my ontological death, I may cry out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And in so doing, receive unction of eternal salvation from salvation. I now pray, O bearer of these wounds, grant unto us each day these same contradictory afflictions. Go ye now in pieces.
Amen. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.